One, two, three. Hey, everybody. We are live on Facebook. It's Sean Ventura here with the Lights Camera Pro podcast. And I'm here with Matt Modderno from the Bleav in Wizards podcast. Hey, Matt.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, I am just going to run a quick ad and talk over it because I'm partnering with this company, Restream. I don't know if you've heard of them, but I'll explain it
Mhm.
real quick right now. Let's see how this works. Their logo here in the bottom. And I also have a referral link in the Facebook Live post that you can check out if you want to check out. So they are giving me some free time with their software to try it out. And I'm not there yet because Facebook Live is going to happen next week as far as scheduling and stuff. But it looks like an amazing product. And if anybody wants to check it out, check it out. So Matt, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Just getting used to this new norm when we web stream and live stream and all this good
Yeah,
stuff.
no, it's
So,
crazy. Everybody's doing it. And I have so many questions about your podcast. But like for me, I just did audio for about 35 podcasts and I started doing the streaming and I tried out YouTube and Facebook and I'm about to try out Twitch and Periscope. But the reach for Facebook is just massive with these
yeah,
live things. So, I mean, my biggest episode was like 100 downloads and these things are reaching like 1,000 people with 500 views. So obviously it doesn't mean all of them are going to turn into downloads, but
sure.
it's kind of cool because you do the live thing first and there's all these elements that I'm messing around with that you can add like text and animations and and putting logos up and running ads. So it's just a very cool thing. It's very different. But
Yeah, if you got to record anyway, you might as well get it on as many
right,
platforms
and
as you
then you
can.
turn it into an audio podcast later. So and then it stays up on Facebook and YouTube and all these places too.
Very
So
cool.
the Bleav in Wizards podcast, is that part of? I was kind of looking around. Is that part of a Bleav network or something?
Yeah, so it's a larger podcast network, the Bleav Network. So, like you said, BLEAV, not the traditional spelling of believe.
Yeah.
I guess they try to get a little cute with it, but the general premise is that you pair a host up with an athlete, and they try to cover. The goal is to have one show for every professional sports team. So, Rick Barry does the Golden State Warriors podcast.
Okay.
Ike Taylor does the Steelers. Obviously, Larry does our does our show. So we got a pretty good amount of stuff. Former Kentucky Wildcat Tony Delk does the Kentucky podcast. So it's a good idea, I think, because you have so many people where it just gives you more credibility. I think is kind of the big goal.
Right. Right. And what is your experience as far as like people listening? Is it like hundreds of downloads or thousands?
We're still in the hundreds range.
Okay.
Honestly, it sort of depends. On who the guest is. That makes things fluctuate a pretty good amount. So it might be a couple hundred one week if it's just the two of us, catching people up on some basketball news, or if it's one of Larry's former teammates, we're tripling that, or it really does
Right.
kind of depend. And I think the big thing for us is, we really kicked this off, right around when the quarantine started. Our goal originally was to kind of have like a soft launch the second half of the season, get everything together and then have like free agency to work on things and kind of build on the show and grow it organically. But it's just hard to have a podcast where you want to talk about actual gameplay when there's no game. So it's been a
Yeah.
little tough.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's super difficult. Have you, all right, I'm going to stop asking questions, but I'm going to ask one more. Have you had Wall or Beal on the show since you started? John Wall or Bradley Beal?
So kind of wanted to, no, we haven't yet. We were kind of hoping to like build up a little more of a foundational base first before pulling our big guns out and
Right.
going to that. So Larry Hughes, my co-host, is from St. Louis. Brad Beal is also from St. Louis, so pretty easy connection there. And he knows
Right.
Brad. And Jason Tatum, that plays for the Celtics, is Larry's godson. So I think we'll probably try to get Jason on at some point. But
Oh,
it's
awesome.
been kind of it's been kind of a weird summer for them too. So um, it was one of those things where we're trying to wrestle with the right time to kind of bring those guys in.
Right, right. So can you tell me, because we have a lot of podcasters that are interested in this, can you tell me, well, I know Bleav, I keep saying Bleav, but it's Bleav actually. The network was started at some point, but I'm really just right now interested in you and how you got started, how you got involved with the podcast.
Yeah, so we've been going since well, we started kind of putting this together conceptually in January, and we've been like running shows since March. So still pretty new to this. It was one of those things where some mutual connections I have mentioned that Bleav the podcast network was looking for hosts and trying to fill up certain shows. And I'm from the DC area originally. The Wizards are my team of preference. I cover the team for a couple different blogs. So it was just one of those things where I have an interest and some background knowledge, and I've been in the locker room and covered the team and stuff like this. So it just made a lot of sense. And then it became kind of who's the right co-host to do it with, and that was sort of the open question for a while. And I have a good friend of mine who's a basketball coach and had mentioned he had some experience with Larry a decade or maybe almost 2 decades ago at this point, and just talked about what a nice guy he was. He's personally one of my favorite players to watch on the Wizards. So didn't see him doing a lot of media, so we reached out and just said, "Hey, Larry, would you be interested?" And luckily it was a yes.
Right. Sorry, I lost that last part there.
Ooh.
Yeah, no, it was a natural fit, right? So just tell me how do you get together with Larry, and how does that all work? Like, do you guys rehearse beforehand? Because he's not like you; he hasn't done a blog or anything like that. You said he has a camp and he does some other things, but how do you get him in there and get him used to doing this?
We did one dry run, and I think for us that's kind of why we wanted to do like sort of a soft launch to this and slowly build up to things. But yeah, he's just been kind of a natural at it, to be honest with you. He's just a well-spoken, articulate dude. He knows the game at such an intricate level that it's just easy for him to talk about it. And it's been kind of a natural fit. And I try to do a lot of the show prep work to make things as easy on him as I can. And hey, here are the topics. Here are some key questions I think we'll want to hit on. But overall, it's just been really kind of easy. It's flowed pretty well together.
Cool. Very cool. So, I'm not sure about copyright issues with these Facebook Lives, and I've been researching it. And I had some picks, and I'm trying to do a poll also, but I'm so worried about like, yeah, I don't even see it. It's not even coming up here. But I'm so worried about like Michael Jordan and
Hmm.
anything you do with Jordan. It's like people come after you out of the woodwork. Because I
Yeah, for
actually
sure.
I worked at Turner, and I did a lot of work for NBA.com, and
Hmm.
worked on some features, and then I worked on inside the NBA and NBA TV and their show Game Time. So I've been
Sure.
around the NBA a lot for the last
Hmm.
7-8 years until last October. But yeah, just thinking about copyright issues and stuff like that. So I
You
have a
got to be
question.
careful for sure.
Yeah, you got to be super careful. So um, I am going to try this out. Let's see if this works. Yeah. So okay. So I was trying to do a poll offline, and you can do it if you're just in Facebook. But I'm in this software called Ecamm, and so I couldn't get to it. I did it, but it's not showing up anywhere. So I'm going to do a little question with you and show the text,
Okay.
because this has auto-generated captions, but we're going to get some text up there. A lot of people watch this stuff silently, so
Makes
it,
sense. Sitting at
it,
work and trying to
yeah, they're
run
at
something in the
work or they're
background.
just doing something and they just watch the captions. So okay, so best wizard of all time. This is your opinion. It's not Bleacher Report or NBA.com or Larry Hughes. So Number one, John Wall, who I think is a great player, so much fun to watch. Number two, Michael Jordan. He's one of the, if not the greatest player of all time. But does it? It gets so tricky with these polls. Does it count because he was only on the Wizards for 2 years? And then your co-host Larry Hughes, which you might have to say because he's your co-host.
Are we talking just specifically the Wizards history, or are we counting bullets here too?
Wizards and bullets and the whole thing. Yeah, I know. I saw some other names online that I wasn't familiar with, but if you want to talk about them too, just go ahead.
Yeah, I think Larry will give me a pass here just for duration. John Wall's been a multi-time All-Star for a decade. So of that list, I think you have to say he's the best Wizard of that group. Obviously MJ in his prime is, my personal opinion, the best player ever. So if we're talking who of those guys had the best ceiling, that's obviously but Jordan. But I would say the best player in Washington franchise history is probably Wes Unseld. Just unbelievable post player, rebounder, defender, outlet passer, and took them kind of their only championship in the late 70s. So I think that's probably the consensus answer. But for me in my time, really, I think the peak of Gilbert Arenas would be sort of my answer. That's the Larry Hughes, Gilbert Arenas, Anton Jameson teams. Those are the ones that really got me as into basketball as I am. Just the most fun I've had watching a team.
Awesome. Yeah, and Gilbert Arenas, wasn't he on the Warriors too at one point?
Yeah, it was actually funny. Larry got traded from Philadelphia to Golden State. They drafted Gilbert. They had Jameson as well. Larry left in free agency to go to the Wizards. And then they eventually traded, or Gilbert joined in free agency in Washington as well, and then they later traded for Jameson. So they were all in Golden State together, and they weren't very good there. And then fast forward a couple of years in Washington, and they were one of the probably 6-7 best teams in the league.
Very cool. And do you know what the hosting service is for your podcast?
We put our stuff up on Art19.
Oh, what is that? I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, it's worth a look. It sort of aggregates it to all the major platforms for you. So it's another
I have
just hosting site,
which does that also. I do it to like 14 different platforms, iHeartRadio and Apple and Spotify. But I haven't heard of Arc19 at all in all my research.
Art19, like just ART. It's what some of the Wizards talk and things like that do the NBC hosted podcasts. They use that. A couple of the other big ones. So I think it's worth a look. It's been good for us. The network sort of sets that stuff up, and it makes it pretty easy on us to just. I go in, put on all the basic info, upload, tag it, all that good stuff.
Very cool. So let's talk a little basketball, man. Is the NBA going to play at Disney? Is this going to happen? I mean, with Kyrie and all these people saying no, is it going to happen?
We actually released an episode yesterday just kind of focusing exactly on this. And we had former Wizard Atan Thomas on. Atan's been sort of, even as a player, was pretty outspoken in the 2000s, before even social media, and has been, put his money where his mouth is from an activism and speaking out standpoint, and wrote a book a couple years ago called We Matter, Athletes and Activism. And he talked with 50 of the greatest athletes of all time, realistically. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell, John Carlos and Tommy Smith from the '68 Olympics that did the Black Power imagery that was, kind of controversial at the time. And it was cool to have Atan on and just sort of get that additional perspective from somebody who's done his homework on the subject and, figure out what the right approach is here. I think it's almost a guarantee that they will play. Commissioner Adam Silver's come out and said, this might not be for everyone. Whether it's everybody playing, I think that's probably a pretty slim chance. But at this point, I think things are kind of too far out of the gate to stop at this point. So I would bet money that they play. But it wouldn't surprise me if there are a couple key names missing.
Right. And I mean, if one person gets sick, it's just all over, is it? Or do they keep going?
No, they're supposedly going to keep going, and I've seen all kinds of things about, they have these rings that they're going to wear that tell them if their core temperature gets too high, and like just all kinds of
Wow.
neat stuff. There's a basketball tournament that's hosted on ESPN called the Basketball Tournament, or TBT, and they put out some safety guidelines a couple weeks ago for their thing, which is starts July 4th weekend. And we had their director of PR on as well, just to talk about their plan. And it was basically, hey, if one person on a team gets sick, we're going to pull the whole team out and just disqualify them. Basically, the NBA said, if a player on a team gets sick, we'll remove that one player. We'll test everybody else on the team. That player will sit out for sort of the requisite amount of time. And then, assuming he gets a clean bill of health at a certain point, they'll reintegrate him if the team is still competing. So they don't think it'll be a showstopper. For them, it's the players are going to be in full quarantine. They can't bring family members until they're, a certain stage into the playoffs. I think it's when 8 teams total are left. So they're trying to keep them isolated. The things I wonder about are like the Disney staff. They don't have to be kind of quarantined in a bubble. So if the people you're around have been out and about in Florida where the cases are kind of out of control and spiking, I just don't really know how that's feasible. And then the NBA announced, I've basically been calling it a snitch line, but basically it's, a hotline that they're going to put out for players to rat out opponents or teammates or
Ooh.
whatever, or anybody that kind of violates the curfew. So it's just very, very weird times.
Very strange. Okay, so the one thing I want to do is I told you this before. I want to ask you another question about Black Widow, but I want to test out the audio here. I know we're live. I know some people are watching, but this is going to go out on replay, and we're going to make it into a podcast. So there's some weirdness happening with the audio a little bit, and I just want to listen to something real quick. So everything sounds fine on Facebook. Let me just try one thing here. Let me just see this. Can you say something?
Sure. Talk about anything you want.
I can't hear you at all, so we're going to go with it. I'm going to go back to what we had. All right, so I read somewhere that Black Widow, the NBA players are going to watch an advanced screening of Black Widow. Did you read about this, or what is going on?
No, I hadn't heard this one. I have heard a couple of them talk about how they have some things lined up to try to keep them occupied, but there's been all kinds of guidelines that have come out for them and sort of slowly been leaked to the public. I think, one of them that got some laughs from the players was no doubles if they play ping pong, like just silly little things like that, making sure that you're not, violating social distance, which if you're 10 of you are sweating on a court and bumping into each other, I would think the least of your worries is
doubles.
yeah, the ping pong table is going to get to you. But I guess some of it's covering their bases and stuff. But I got to imagine if you're going to keep these guys cooped up that long with no family, no friends, there's got to be a lot of stuff, set up for them to kind of keep them occupied. I think the one thing that will be cool is that you might have more of like an AAU atmosphere where I think these guys will actually stick around and watch their opponents play and scout out other things. So you won't have a ton of people in the stands, but it'd just be kind of funny to see LeBron shooting a free throw and, Kawhi Leonard behind the basket waving his arms around to try to distract him. You might get some novel stuff out of that.
Yeah, you might, but I watched some NASCAR, and I'm not a NASCAR fan, but I watched NASCAR. I watched Bundesliga and soccer. I watched golf. I watched a few things without fans, man, and it is so bizarre. It is so weird to watch that. And I think the NBA will be even stranger because there's such a reaction from the fans, especially when you're talking playoffs and somebody blocks somebody, and you still get the players jumping off the bench, and you still get the coach throwing his, thing, but a towel or something. But to not have the fans, I mean, there are times when Steph Curry's made a shot or LeBron's made a block, and it's just like the whole stadium erupts, and it's an energy.
Yeah, I went to a playoff game last year. Last year. It was the Warriors playing the Clippers, and the Warriors blew one of the biggest leads. I think maybe the biggest lead in a playoff game, and ended up losing to a Clippers team that was okay, but not as good as they are this year. And just at various peaks in that game, like that place, I thought it was going to like collapse. I mean, it was an old, beat up arena
It was
anyway.
crazy. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Warriors when
it
they were
just
at their peak.
there's no way to replicate that. And I think the counter is it is kind of cool sometimes to be in a gym and watch a basketball game where you hear the ball, you hear the players a little more, you hear the shoes squeak, and there's something kind of novel about that. But there's all kinds of talk that they've had about how do you sort of replicate the advantage a team gets from being a home team in a playoff game. Like you worked all year for home court advantage. Is there sort of some way to simulate that? So, one of the things I heard thrown out early was, maybe the air quotes home team starts every quarter with the ball, and you don't do a jump ball or something like that. Just some way to give them some kind of extra benefit to make up for the fact that they just don't get their home crowd.
Yeah, and so I have a couple of questions. One is, are you guys recording in a studio? Are you recording remote? Well, you're recording remotely now, but before this COVID happened, were you recording in a studio or just in an office or?
So we're each recording individually. I think the majority of our episodes have featured a guest, so it is kind of easier to do that through Zoom, record it as a call, and then I go through and edit it all after. But Larry actually lives full time in St. Louis. I think during a typical year, he's on the road a lot and a lot of appearances and stuff like that. But he does run a youth academy in St. Louis, try to give back to the community there where he's from. So it would be remote most of the time anyway. And then I have my home office and stuff that we can record from.
And you're in DC?
Yeah, I'm in Maryland, but close enough to DC.
Right. And how are you promoting it? Do you have ads? Do you have just like promoting game? Well, there's not games, but would you promote games and like come out to Friday night 2-for-1 tickets or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we'll try to get into is trying to do some actual promotion with the team once there's some things to tie it back to, and like I've seen it where another podcast has done like, hey, come to G League night at the G League affiliate, and we'll do all the fans could come and hang out, and we'll do a meet and greet and stuff like that. I have no idea what that's going to look like even next season. It's just my personal hunch that probably all of next NBA season is played without fans too, at least maybe through the end of this calendar year. So that's kind of tough to arrange the in-person things and maybe schedule some stuff around when Larry's in town. But a lot of social media promotion, a lot of just the overall network we're on, and trying to use and leverage the good guests that we've had. I mean, we've had a half dozen NBA players. We're only on episode 15, and just kind of big local guys. So 3 of Larry's former teammates have been on. I've had Muggsy Bogues to come talk about what it was like to be in Space Jam.
Nice.
Walt Williams is sort of a big local legend because he played at the University of Maryland. So I had Walt on. He played over a decade in the NBA. Tennis player Francis Tiafoe, has been as high as like 25 in the world. He's a Wizards fan, so we had him on, just trying to get different people.
Nice.
Couple writers, different perspectives like that.
Very, very cool. And yeah, that's a lot of my questions, man. So I don't know. I don't know about the NBA. Like you said, if it's not going to happen until next year, it's going to be really interesting. I mean, I know that I think Turner just got a big contract, and ESPN just got a big contract for television, and it's like I wonder if the fans will. I mean, like people will watch more because they're not able to go to the games, or the numbers will be higher. They'll make more money. It's all kind of up in the air.
Yeah, I think they rely, on the national TV rights are probably the biggest thing to drive revenue for them. But regional TV rights is a big deal, and it's curious what that'll look like. There's obviously they had to hit a certain amount of that money for their regional TV deals. I don't know if the teams that the 8 teams that don't make it into this Orlando bubble, if they still count, or if regional networks are going to carry, if I want to watch the Wizards play Orlando in one of these remaining 8 games, do I get to watch that on my local network, or is that only on Turner and ESPN? Like, I just have no sense for how they're going to go about, making that available to the public. And are games going to be going on at the same time? Are there multiple courts? Are they staggered? Is it, hey, only in the evenings we're going to have a couple games? If you've got 22 teams in one area, and you got a lot of games to get through over a short amount of time, I got to imagine some of them are going to be going on concurrently. So just maybe Turner have a game and ESPN has a game, and then their local affiliates all get it too. It's just very interesting, I think, how they're going to play that out. And it would be my expectation that, well, so one of the things the NBA's tried to avoid is we don't want to go into the summer because you lose people to vacations and going to the beach and stuff like that. But I don't want to end up in the fall because then you got to compete more with football. I'm sort of the opinion, that if people want to watch basketball, that it's so accessible to them now that they're going to do it. You're not tied to like your one cable network and I have to watch on, channel 26 because that's the one thing you can find it on. If you want to watch a game from your phone on vacation or wherever you are, people are going to do it. So the NBA is creative. They'll find ways. And, one of the problems for them the last few years has been, do people even watch games anymore anyway? If you're under a certain age, are you just watching highlights on Twitter? Like, it's just a different world.
It's really tricky. There was one thing where the commissioner was talking about 99-cent games for the fourth quarter because most people just watch the fourth quarter if they watch at all. But my kids were huge Hawks and Warriors fans, and they just watch everything on highlights. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? You got to watch the game.
Right.
This is craziness. So are the Wizards part of this bubble, or did they not make the bubble?
They included 22 teams. Only 16 of them will obviously make the playoffs, but they took 9 teams from the Eastern Conference and 13 from the Western Conference. So it's interesting how they sort of did the cutoff there. You had to be within sort of a certain threshold of being able to make the playoffs realistically.
Right.
So the Wizards are 5.5 games back of the 8th seed, which is currently the Orlando Magic. And they've said that in these 8 games, if they can cut that lead down to only 4-game difference, then they would force a play-in series with whoever is still in the 8th seed, whether that's Orlando or someone else. So because, they'd be on the outside looking in, they'd have to win 2. It's basically a best-of-3 series, but Orlando starts with a 1-game lead. So they win once, and they're automatically in. So the Wizards would have to beat them 2 times in a row to make the playoffs.
Right. I didn't realize that. I thought we were going straight to playoffs. There's a few games before the playoffs to make the playoffs. Okay. I did not realize that was happening.
It's a weird sort of thing where, they wanted more teams, and they wanted certain teams realistically, like Zion Williamson is on the Pelicans. They're a huge draw. They're not currently in the playoff picture. I think there's a reasonable chance they would have made the playoffs under regular circumstances, but the NBA wants him to end up in the playoffs. That's great for ratings. So this gives people a chance to sort of it's a puncher's chance at least to make it in. And I think it's a good way to do it because a lot of players wouldn't want to go down there and play if they didn't have a shot at still sneaking into the playoffs. But they've also said we can't start the playoffs cold, that there needs to be some sort of playing our way into game form. So they're going to, I think a lot of players are heading down that way next week, even to start getting ready, start getting, acclimated to their teams and that sort of thing. And then there's, one of those situations where I think they can have over the month of July, they can have 2 exhibition games with another team to try to get themselves together.
It's a big difference to get into that playing shape rather than regular shape. And some people like LeBron James have a huge advantage because they have gyms in their houses and some of the other players don't. And I'm sure he's had Lakers over there to play every day, and some people can't do that. So that's the whole thing is just crazy, dude. It's so crazy.
I never expected we'd be in a situation like this. So one of the things that we did like a mailbag episode the other week where we gave people a chance to kind of get Larry's perspective on things. And one of the questions we kept getting is just, has the NBA done a good job of this? And I think both of our answer was just kind of, well, you can't really judge anything. Like there's no other
Nothing's ever
situation
happened
to
like this
compare it to.
before.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to give people the ultimate pass on this one. It's just, there's no real great way to do this, and no matter what you say, there's going to be some contingent of people that, you're distracting from social issues, or you're not considering safety, or it's a tough thing for them. There's going to be somebody that dislikes what they do regardless. So I think all things considered, it's as good a plan as they could have come up with.
And there's really been no press about, like, Kevin Durant supposedly had it, Rudy Gobert, and what's his great player, the co on the Nuggets there, Donovan
Oh,
Mitchell.
Donovan Mitchell's on the Jazz with
Yeah,
Gobert,
with
and
Gobert. Sorry,
and
those guys had it, and there's been no update. Like, I guess they're just fine now, and they never had any. I mean, they had symptoms, but they never got really sick or anything. So
yeah, there was no supposedly lasting impact to them. Karl Anthony Towns, that plays for the Timberwolves, his mom actually passed away from it, so that was one of the bigger stories in the league.
oh
And
wow! And did she get it from him, or
the,
they don't know?
I think that's kind of too hard to track. I don't think he
Wow, I didn't even
tested
hear that.
positive for it. So, it just, the Gobert thing was a big deal. I don't know if you remember this when it happened, but he made a big joke out of it in a press
Yes.
conference and was licking the mics. And now supposedly there's a rift with him and some of his teammates where, like Donovan Mitchell got sick. So now he's annoyed that he had to deal with that. And Chris Paul said he slept in his car for a night or two, because he didn't want to be around his kids, or hung out in his car all day and snuck into a guest room at night. Like, it's just a very, very weird world.
Yeah, it's so bizarre, man. Well, is there anything you like? Are you still doing the blog? Is there anything you want to talk about, like your blog, or tell people about where they can find the Bleav podcast?
Yeah, sure. So, for anybody that reads a decent amount of online sports content, there's one of the bigger platforms is called SB Nation. They have a Washington Wizards specific blog called Bullets Forever. Just kind of harkening back to the original name. So I do some writing there. I just did an article the other week about 6 guys. The Wizards should consider signing to add to their roster for the end of the year. But a lot of times it's just sort of, focusing on some stuff we talk about on the show, and trying to give it another twist, and take on those kinds of things. So that's kind of the main thing that I do to keep active with the team, and just stay involved in sports overall, other than this podcast. So anywhere people get their podcasts, all the good stuff, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, anything like that. It's BLEAV in Wizards. Again, kind of co-hosted with former Wizard, 13-year NBA veteran Larry Hughes. We've got a bunch of big-time guests lined up for this summer. Probably have his former teammate Gilbert Arenas on in a couple weeks.
Cool.
Try to get some of the Wizards guys. Maybe wait until after. It's a long shot that they'll make the actual playoffs. So maybe once they're technically eliminated or something, we can get a couple guys on, talk about what the bubble experience was like. So the running joke for them is that their hotel is called the Yacht Club at Disney. So find out a little bit, what life is like on the Yacht Club, and get some insight there.
Very cool, man. So as far as podcasting, and this is your first podcast, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have a broadcast journalism degree, so I've done a ton of radio. Hosted my own college radio show back in the day, so I got a pretty good sense for how to do that. All the sound levels and editing, and make it sound reasonable. And I worked for ESPN Radio for a while, and a couple outlets on radio shows, TV shows, things like that. So first official podcast, but I've kind of been showing up on other people's for the last couple of years.
Right. And have you seen a surge or an increase in the video podcasts as far as the sports stuff? A lot of people, SB Nation, Bleacher Report, NBA.com, they're doing like some sports video podcasts.
You know, honestly, not as much as you would think. It's some of the bigger outlets. Like I think ESPN's had a lot of spin-off content on YouTube, and they try to do like a Snapchat thing for a while. I don't know how successful that's been for
Mm,
them. So stuff like that. CBS Sports has been doing a lot of YouTube related content. But as far as some of the more like website based stuff, I haven't seen that much, and it's kind of interesting to me. I think that would be an easy way for them to do that. I think maybe that's just some people prefer that particular medium that may not translate as well. But the Athletic does a lot of obviously athletic coverage, and they've had a lot of their writers also sort of do double duty as podcasters, and I think that's sort of had varying degrees of success for them. But I haven't seen any video content from them at all either. So it's just kind of I think sometimes people are sort of slow to realize that that's an option. And
yeah.
for us, it hasn't been. We put all of our podcast as audio files on YouTube. We haven't been
Right.
posting the live feeds yet, just because there's every episode there's been some cutout of audio, or somebody's internet goes out for a few minutes, and
Yep. That's
I,
just part of it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I'm just not as skilled a video editor anymore. It's been a decade for me since I've done that kind of stuff. So
Right.
I'd want to clean ours up a little bit. And there's a good amount of, we goof around for 10 minutes before and after, or talk about next week. And
Right. Right.
so it doesn't work as well live for us as it does for you.
So what would you have kind of an interesting kind of advice to give people because you're part of this network and you're also part of this team. What kind of advice would you give to people who want to be involved in sports podcasts? Would you say go and be a writer first, or what would your advice be?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think my first thing would be don't expect to make a lot of money from it. Sports in general is one of those things where there's so many people that want to do it,
Mm,
that it's a tough one to be profitable in. I think if you're that sort of top 10 percenter, you can make a pretty big living. And coming out of college, I got offered a job at ESPN Radio, and it would have been, hey, come be the DC producer for the Mike and Mike show, and run it from here and run our local ads. And you'd be here 3 o'clock in the morning to get ready for the 5 a.m. show and all this stuff. And that was going to pay like 20 grand. I mean, it's one of those things. So if you want to make freelance money on the back end, you could come work games at night and collect sound at the game. So do you really want to work 24 hours a day just to kind of scrape by and stuff? So it's just, they can always find somebody else that wants to work in sports. So I think my suggestion to a lot of people is have a day job, do something you like to do, and use this as a way to kind of have something you're passionate about. And I've had a couple experiences over the year, which is another reason why I didn't want to do this as a profession, where if you just have a bad experience with somebody that you're a fan of, it makes work tough. And now you've not only hurt your day job, but also your passion and your hobby. So it's just kind of nice to keep those things separate, I think.
yeah. Well, very cool, Matt. I wish the Wizards the best of luck.
Yeah, thanks, man. We're going to need all the help we can get.
Exactly. So what? There was John Wall, Bradley Beal, and who was the third really good player there? I think he left.
So they had Otto Porter for a
Otto Porter.
while.
Where did he
Yeah.
go?
He got traded to the Chicago Bulls.
Okay, that's right. I
Yeah,
remember that. Okay.
yeah, they offered him a max deal, and that sort of didn't work out for them, maybe as well as they would have hoped. I think he was really good in that sort of third wheel route, but didn't have maybe star potential enough to justify a max contract.
Right.
They already have Beal on a max and Walls on the whole super max. So if you've got 40 million of your $100 million committed to one player, it's
That's
really
what a
tough
lot
to
of
afford
people have
that.
said. Yeah, is that they have those two guys with a ton of money.
Yeah, just there's not a whole lot you can do, especially. I mean, it's been really unfortunate that Wall's been hurt, but yeah, it's tough.
It is what it is. All right, man. Well, you have a great day. Thanks so much for doing this. And
Yeah,
I
a lot of fun.
will, yeah. And I will share this on all the social media: Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn even, and then I'm going to make it into an audio podcast later, which will go to all the Apple, Google podcasts and all that. So if you can do the same,
And of course.
and hopefully we'll talk again soon, sometime in another capacity. But good luck, man.
Yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate it. You do the same, and obviously I'll make sure to share and all that good stuff on our end.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much. You have a great day.
All right, you too.
Take
Take
care,
care.
Matt.